I want to talk to you about a story that would take place when you were but a young child. So, in the early 2000s, there was a really weird phenomena going on that if you were going to listen to Janet Jackson's hit song, Rhythm Nation, on your laptop computer.
Not going the way I thought it was going.
If you listened to it on your laptop computer, your computer would crash.
Is this a frequency thing?
So this is...
Because we've talked about, electronic frequencies affecting other things quite a few times.
Yeah.
But
well, you got to imagine, see, you're smart today. In 2025, you've kind of figured...
Dude, I read a thing about people reading what was on RAM based on the frequency that was outputting. So, yeah.
Well, remember we talked about that. Like we were talking about, there were air-gapped systems that they were able to read the resonance of memory.
And monitors, too, based on the graphic card frequencies and stuff. It's weird, but I guess it's possible. And maybe with AI now, things have gotten even crazier because they could process how that is read. I don't know.
Yeah.
Where are you going with this?
Well, so here's what you had. All right, we're going to take you back. This song, Rhythm Nation, that you could play on your computer. And depending on how loud you had it playing on your laptop, not only could it crash your computer, it would crash the computer next to it. You nailed it right off the bat. What was happening here is that we didn't use solid states like we do today. We used rotational disks.
Yeah.
And on laptops, the rotational disks are a lot smaller, so there's a lot less shielding than there is if you were to take a look at the two hard drives. There's a substantial amount of shielding and isolation and things like that on a 3.5-inch hard drive versus a 2.5-inch. It's funny. It's like we say, oh yeah, a laptop hard drive is a 2.5-inch drive, which does measure its width, and a traditional hard drive is 3.5. But what happens is when you look at, that's just one dimension.
That's
it's
just
one which it may
size.
be 1 inch wider,
yeah,
but it's 4 times thicker.
Yep.
And quite a bit taller, right?
Yeah.
Or, so, and
I never thought about the shielding, because those laptop drives are tiny, but they got to fit in the laptop.
And they had to be light.
Mm-hmm.
So you had a motor and you had your actuator and everything, plus all your platters and heads.
Yeah.
Now, something else you may not realize is that the vast majority of hard drives in laptops, because of performance, they would have been 4,800 RPMs.
Oh, instead of the 54 standard.
So on a regular computer, when we were doing traditional spindle rotational disks, we never got more than 15,000 RPMs, and that's really just in servers.
Yeah, those are super fast.
Western Digital for workstations made the Velociraptor disks.
Mm-hmm.
They were sweet. They were 10K SATA drives. But for the most part, regular disks operated 5400 was cheap, and 7200 was kind of, that's what you wanted. Like if you were building a computer, you're building it with 7200 or the Raptor 10K drives. If you could make that happen, you were sweet. Okay, so on laptops we had 4800, but you could, on some models, they did make a high performance 5400 RPM model. All right, so what is all of this doing? There is frequencies that would resonate from the speakers that, when coupled with the sort of performance characteristics of the 5400 RPM rotational drives, would effectively create interference. They couldn't, because they're spinning just a little bit faster, they got a weaker read speed. When they were reading the platters, they got a weaker signal than what was acceptable because the magnetic interference coming from the speakers. So what ends up happening is you would get a read fault while the computer's running. What happens? Bam, computer crashes.
Wow.
So a lot of this is conjecture. They knew that it had something to do with this. They never did quite figure it out until like 2022. And by this point in time,
people are barely using hard disk drives at that point.
Yeah, Windows did all kinds of stuff to do integrated filters so that those frequencies could be turned off. You basically high pass, low pass filters.
I was researching NAS drives like 5 years ago or something like that. And some brands included anti-resonance features so that the frequencies of the drives sitting right next to each other wouldn't sync up and mess with each other and create a bunch of vibration.
Because you could get some EMF kind of going off of it. Like you'd have a magnetic field.
So we've come a long way, yeah.
Yeah. So the ultimate fix for the Rhythm Nation crashing was that...
Just don't play Rhythm Nation.
I mean, if you want to live a lame life, Griff.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So the ultimate fix, Microsoft figured out that this was a frequency, what frequency in that song was causing this. And so they rolled out a patch in the operating system that would effectively prevent your speakers, the audio cards, from playing that frequency. So if you were to actually play the song on your laptop, technically speaking, you weren't listening to the full song.
Yeah.
Certain frequencies were being filtered out.
Weird. Are these frequencies that are in human hearing range?
Also not really sure.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously they should be, right?
If it's a song,
because
you would assume, yeah.
Unless it's a factor of something that they did digitally. But it's just crazy to me that here we had, it's very specific to very specific hard drives. Because, right, there's low shielding.
There's a lot of coincidence here.
5,400 RPMs means that the drives are more susceptible to issues. Because they used to think, oh, maybe the song was just, it was rocking so hard.
It would like vibrate.
That it was causing the platter. But no, there was no damage to the platters. Like, you don't want the head to actually touch the platter.
Yeah.
That's a bad thing. They thought maybe something was causing them to vibrate and bounce, and that really just wasn't it. It was just effectively that frequency was interacting, and when it would try to read that position on the platter, this would effectively create that EMF that would mess with it, and so then it never got a clean read. And if you're in your operating system and we're trying to load something, guess what would happen? You got your error.
So for when these laptops were being used until 2022, so basically 9 years or so, we just thought this was magic.
We really didn't know.
Like what was happening? But
finally in 2022, somebody finally figured out enough of it. Actually got, and to be fair, a guy got really close, but he could never reproduce it.
Oh.
But it's because if you looked at the test, he was using an external hard drive. Because, right, we're already on solid states.
Yeah,
so he had to find a rotational disk that would work on a computer, and we don't use rotational disks. So an external drive is already going to have some built-in protections, and it's going to be further distant from the laptop.
It's not in the laptop, yeah.
So they were able to get close, but he ended up not doing it. But yeah.
Fascinating story. That's super weird.
It is super weird.
Huh. It's cool we found that out.
And it means nothing because at this point we're solid state, so it'll never happen.
Yeah.
But you know it does happen. What's the difference between a cold open and a regular story? It's just playing an intro.
Yeah.
Telling you who we are. We've been talking for like 10 or 15 minutes, but you may not know that you're listening to the Lighthouse IT Solutions podcast. I'm Matt Almendinger. I'm joined with Griffin. We got lots to talk about today if you couldn't figure it out, and not all of it is about Janet Jackson, which, by the way, you should take a look at her catalog. She had some music video that was cool, so Straight Up, and it was like there was a cat that she danced around with. It was trippy as all get out. The 80s were freaking nuts, man. 80s were nuts. We got lots to talk about on this show, and some of it is relevant. Some of it is, there's probably going to be, I mean,
a lot of
Janet Jackson's not replacing Nicolas Cage anytime soon.
I'm so glad.
Because, well, I do respect and appreciate some of her work. I'm not a huge fan, I'm just going to say. But if you are, no shame. She's fun, high energy. Gotta love her. But I do want to talk about AI. And I have a feeling that you want to talk a lot about AI as well. Because what else do we have to talk about?
It is the world we live in now. So, yeah.
All right. Gemini 2.5 Pro. That's a Google AI. Actually, it was really cool because it can take millions of tokens for instruction and things like that. So it's one of the highest inputs that you can provide into one of the AIs. It just recently beat Pokémon Blue.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, this was a pretty big thing people were doing. Like Twitch plays Pokemon and things like that, where people were initiating commands and that kind of thing. It was like a group effort and whatnot. And people took that idea and was like, oh, hey, this new AI thing. Let's see if they can play it. Let's stream it. But honestly, It's kind of been going on a while and nothing has really happened. So I'm surprised it finally beat it because it was doing pretty poorly.
Well, apparently Gemini was like one of the things that Gemini scraped was the Pokemon Blue
like speed run
guide or whatever. Yeah, because it did. It beat it. It was pretty cool. And if you want, I've got a link to a small video that you can play that effectively shows you the Twitch stream.
Yeah, some highlights or something.
And shows it beating the game.
Wow. I'm curious about how long it took.
It got picked up because the AI team at Google, the Gemini team, promoted it as a victory. They actually weren't the people behind it, though. They just were like, somebody's like, wow, look at this. Gemini beat it. And like, it was retweeted. And we're like, that's sweet. Yeah, go Gemini.
Yeah. Had no intervention with humans or anything. Like, it just did it from start to finish by itself. But it took 37 days to beat the game, apparently. So.
Continuously? So that means it lost a lot.
I mean, it's still AI, you know. There was no hope in some of these other ways.
I can't make fun of it. There's games, looking at you, Dark Souls, where I think I made it 15 minutes before I said I'll never beat this game.
I mean, Baldur's Gate, man, it takes you months. Unless you're speed running and whatnot, too, I guess. But it takes me months.
OpenAI, I think both of us wanted to talk about this one.
Yep, restructuring a bit, trying to still go for profit, but it is...
Well, so it actually, they were thinking about going for profit, right? We weren't sure what way they were going to go, and they made a very interesting, based on some really good feedback, because they want to grow. They need to be able to grow, and as a nonprofit, there's a lot of limitations on how much money you can kind of take in.
Yeah.
Because you basically have to spend it, right?
But you can restructure to kind of get around some of those issues.
And nonprofits can own for-profit entities.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of what happened here. However, OpenAI has said that what they want to do is, after deliberation and discussion, they think it's important that the concept of AI be controlled by the nonprofit, which ultimately, yes, is funded by a for-profit entity that they have, which is called a PBC, a public benefit corporation. So it's a for-profit entity that's for the public's good, that is allowed to make money and make contributions back to the parent nonprofit. The reason for this form of structure is that this allows them, as a board who is sort of separated, not just from the revenue, but from like the ethics and everything. That was sort of their thing, is we want to make sure that we're doing things that continue to bring AI to everyone, and it's not just about wringing every dollar and cent out. Mm-hmm. Also about ethics, also about user input to be able to help guide. So by having the nonprofit entity do this, the for-profit entity has less say in its own direction. OpenAI will control that as a nonprofit still. There's only one holdout, though, that I saw you.
Microsoft.
Yeah.
Yep.
Which I don't think this is. I think they're just going to protect themselves, right? They're just looking into it because this is all very new.
Yeah. And Microsoft being, I think, the largest investor.
Pretty much.
By,
if it's
by
not
a lot.
the.
Yeah. So, yeah, they pretty much just have to get approval from Microsoft and whatnot, and obviously some government stuff. But Microsoft's really the only one that they're waiting on, which, again, yeah, like you said, they're really just trying to make sure that everything's hunky-dory and that they've
made
safe on their
significant investments.
Yeah.
A lot of what
they don't want to just be cut
OpenAI is
out.
Doing is what the basis of Copilot is, right?
Yeah. It makes sense why that's
they're going to double check and make sure that they agree with this. But I think from a mission standpoint, it makes sense.
Yeah.
In this process, by the way, this actually isn't too far off from what Anthropic and XAI are all doing. So you're all pretty much exactly the same.
But yeah, some cool stuff going on with them. I'm hoping that works out for both Microsoft and OpenAI, because it easily could. Why wouldn't it, you know? But this is a good direction. Makes sense. So I wanted to talk about some of the trends that we've been seeing from 2024 and then the first bit of 2025. It's some interesting stuff that people are using AI for, and I think it's relevant here to talk about. A lot of 2024 was, generating ideas, search just as a tool instead of like Google and that kind of thing.
Yep.
A lot of like process improvement, general advice, drafting emails, that kind of thing. But 2025, man, some new use cases have been coming up, or these use cases that were a little bit further down the list from 2024 are very high now. Organizing your life, finding purpose, therapy and companionship, those are the top 3.
Which they did say that there is some concern about people who are becoming dependent on AI for companionship.
And the fact that those are not licensed therapists. We don't know what really they're going to be affected.
Have you ever watched the movie Her?
Yeah, exactly. Her is a great example of potentially,
bad.
Yeah. So it's concerning, but also like, is it helping people? We don't really know yet, but that's the fact. This is what it's being used for.
I think what's fantastic is that we're already becoming, I'm already becoming fascinated and encompassed by the more complex systems.
Code review and generating code is massive.
I would say that I started off, if you're not getting into AI, if you're listening to this, you're not sure, you're not playing around too much with it, I want to encourage you of a couple things. The first one is if you're not using AI, learn the basics to keep yourself safe, okay? There's tons of good rules out there, but ultimately, don't put in information that is proprietary or secretive or anything like that.
Yep.
Keep things generalized. And just remember that whatever AI is going to give you, you still need to have a general knowledge about and an understanding to interpret the results. That disclaimer out of the way. I think there's some levels of maturity for AI, we'll say prompt engineering. And you said it. We started off, we were using it like a Google.
Yeah.
Except now that we're starting to learn how people are using prompt engineering, the best way I can describe it, and I think we talked about this during one of our staff meetings because I'm trying to get our team to leverage these tools more. Pretend it is a coworker who forgets who they are every day.
Yeah.
Be very explicit, but remind them who they are. So the coolest thing about your AI models is that when you provide them with a context of who they are, it focuses their response very well. And based on how you describe who they are, like you're going to humanize it. You talk about we personify our car, right? Some people give their car a name. You could say, hey, your name is Jimmy. You are a marketing expert that specializes in Instagram. And like your goal, Jimmy, is that you want to do these things. Can you provide me with 3 examples of what you would do?
Yeah.
You could do things like that. And all of a sudden you've provided a backstory on how to think, and you've kind of controlled its world. And by doing that, you control hallucinations a lot of times.
Yeah, I would say also ask it why it came to those conclusions as well. And then,
but that's a great thing. How did you get to this answer? And then the final thing is if it takes you a while to get to a satisfactory result, ask it how you can improve getting to where, hey, this is the answer I wanted. In the future, how could I prompt you to get to this answer sooner? And the AI will then start to train you back.
Yeah.
So today, if you're not doing anything in AI, use it as a Google. Get comfortable with what types of results it is. But I really encourage you, the biggest step you can provide it with is persona. That's what I'm going to call it. I'm going to call it, they call it context. I'm going to call it persona. Provide it with a persona, describe to the AI who it is, and then challenge it to solve a problem. And you'll find that the answers are they're going to blow your mind.
Yeah. It's interesting that support and technical assistance in general are the ones that are getting higher up. Like specific search is lower down and that kind of thing. People are using it in different ways than even just last year. And yeah, I think it's like, the therapy and companionship and organizing life and finding purpose being the top 3. People giving it a persona
and it's important.
Talking like it's, a counselor or something.
And it's important to remember you may need to define an audience.
Yeah.
So if I'm trying to do something and I'm trying to explain to a customer how to do something, I can say, you're an IT technical support technician that's working on the following problem, and I can feed it into the client. But I could also say, how would you reply to the end user?
Yeah.
And now what is that little difference in the context? It's going to simplify it. Versus, how would you explain to a colleague? And you're going to get more technical response.
Yeah.
Little subtle nuances will affect how it replies to you. And as you learn those things, and that's important to remember, the more detailed your context is, the more applicable your response is. So that's the hard part, is learning how to feed that initial statement.
And it's interesting you were kind of giving it a persona and talking about it as a coworker. because the Anthropic CEO has come out with a very interesting theory recently that I wanted to talk about.
Okay.
And it's the fact that you're probably going to see completely AI virtual employees coming out soon.
It's possible. I think you could be close.
It's the idea that AI-powered virtual employees are expected to emerge, he thinks, within a year, prompting, cybersecurity concerns and that kind of thing, and, challenges with corporate environments and whatnot. But, yeah, I mean, even in some of the AI training that, like you said, here at work, the idea that you should be treating it as maybe an intern or like really low down or something like that, somebody who just maybe forgets, every time. But with the advancements of reasoning and the entire memory aspect that people are coming out with now, where these chats can be, your account basically is the memory now instead of each individual chat. Yeah, this is possible. This is, give this person an Excel sheet for data analysis and boom. Now.
So the reason that that's going to be, I think, such an important and such an easier thing than you think it is the concept of, you might hear the term RAG. And so a RAG is just like retrieval augmented generation. Okay. So we've talked a little bit about this. We have not two AI platforms, but we have two chat windows at Lighthouse. We have one that's a little bit more security focused, but it integrates with several different AI platforms, right? Yep. Okay. So we can use 15 to 20 different AI models, LLMs if we want. But we also have Copilot. And we've kind of talked like there's a difference because Copilot can operate in two modes. They say the Copilot says for web or for personal for web or for work.
Yeah.
When you click on for work, it changes sort of the security context. And I'm not going to say it's scary, not scary, but when you click on for work, it can connect to everything in Microsoft 365 you have access to.
Yep. Outlook email, your Word documents, your Excel documents, your PowerPoint presentations, everything.
And all of that can be referenced for data. Okay. That is effectively what a RAG is. So it is this built-in sort of context. We talked about building the persona. Well, if you're building this persona independently every single time, you like, well, what if I wanted to be more specific about who you are? You talk about these virtual employees. All a virtual employee is going to be a highly described RAG.
Yeah,
that the
with
LLM
access to your company's network, basically.
That the LLM can use to understand the business and interact with external data source.
Yeah. It's just that intern who doesn't like to talk outside of Teams.
And so now, yes, that's hilarious. So now what you have is you're no longer giving them a persona because the RAG is already established. Parts of the RAG will obviously do that for you.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very fascinating. I think it's incredibly possible. I'm just telling you based on what Matt is doing over here in Lighthouse land and what I've been able to kind of accomplish weekly, like weekly as in like WEA, okay? Like I'm an idiot in this stuff. But the level of things I've been able to create using these RAGs, the next bit for me is implementing the concept of these model context protocols is the next big thing you're going to hear about, these MCPs. Mm-hmm. MCPs allow, so I'm going to generalize this. So if you're an AI expert out there, just go ahead and gloss over, fast forward 20 seconds. But I'm going to overgeneralize. RAG is a lot about your inputs. MCP has a lot of control on how it can interact outside of itself. So MCP is sort of a way of it talking to other things and understanding how to talk to other things.
Yeah.
So
Copilot's,
effectively what this means is today we operate through a chat window with Copilot,
mm-hmm.
but MCP allows us to say, and actually MCP does kind of work with when it creates a document for you it puts it in your SharePoint. That is effectively what an MCP is it's able to create that thing and then do something with it.
Yeah, a lot of the stuff we talked about with OpenAI coming out with the operator feature, that's a lot of this, yeah.
Yeah, so right now, the content and stuff that it generates still stays within what we call our chat window.
Yeah.
But an MCP would let it say...
It would take action.
Yeah. So what if, let me just pose this to you, what if an AI could answer your phone, take a message, find out the priority, And that's one of the things you would say is you would provide this context. And then somebody would say, hey, I'm working on my laptop, blah, blah, blah. Or, I guess I'm using our business, but maybe you're a realtor. You had an AI attendant that could talk to you in speech because that's where we're at now. What if it said, okay, I know that as a realtor, I need the following pieces of information. What home are you interested in? And what are your goals? What are you expecting? Do you have a budget? And it'd be able to piece all of that together and then be able to, okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to search the web for you. So MCP could reach out to Google, find a list of links, and then MCP could also reach out to, say, your email and say, okay, I'm going to compose an email. So the AI composes the email.
Yeah.
The MCP just provides a liaison to output that data to various sources.
Yeah.
Way
more than just the chat window response that you still have to review and look at everything.
We are moments away from you being, I hate to say this because, right, like we've got some real people text here, but we are moments away from me being able to have an AI. I have a lot of the infrastructure here at Lighthouse in place that we could take a phone call and an AI agent, you could create a brand new user for.
Yeah, just based on
just calling our agent,
the client calling
and going, hey,
I
need this person starting on Tuesday.
Yeah.
It collects all of that information, and then using the MCP stuff, it could actually fire off workflows and populate the data that those workflows need. Because today, those workflows are disconnected. I need somebody to input that data in. Yeah. Well, now I could potentially not need that.
Yeah. So this Anthropic guy, like, he's not wrong. It's just, it's wild that this is not far away.
I think it's here. I think he's saying next year so people don't freak out. I think it's technically here today, but he's trying to figure out how to productivize it. Does that mean? I don't know. He's trying to turn it into something he can truly monetize.
Yeah. We'll see. A lot of the article about this one was all about the cybersecurity concerns and whatnot. But honestly, you hire a normal human being and you still got to worry about a lot of cybersecurity issues.
Yeah.
So, yeah, fascinating stuff, man.
Do you remember before AI, longtime listeners may remember that we talked a lot about Epic Games and the lawsuit with Apple. This thing is still going on. We just got tired of stop talking about it.
Yeah, the Apple Store
30% thing. It's egregious.
Yeah.
And what the big problem was is that Apple was basically going to shut them down because you weren't even allowed to talk about having an external store.
Yeah. They want every single purchase to be done through Apple.
Because they want their 30%. But if Epic said, hey, you're on an Apple device, you need to buy through a web browser.
Yeah.
Apple said, well, you're circumventing our tool. It was stupid. They should have known that it was illegal.
There were exceptions to the rule at every turn.
Inconsistent.
Amazon didn't have to do this thing.
Well, they did it first, and that's why the Amazon app, you could look up inventory, and then when you clicked on it, it would launch it in a browser. It was stupid.
It's crazy.
And eventually, Apple starts looking stupid because people on Android can order and it's easier.
Yeah.
Apple's like, oh, we can't do that. So they gave exceptions out. Yeah. Okay, you get an exception.
Which was why, Epic was upset by that, and it's a whole thing.
And they should be.
Yeah.
But to me, the angering thing is, I understand the convenience and the 30%. Fine. But 30% is a lot of margin.
30% is pretty high, yeah.
And your market, if it's $5 and you're paying 30% commission out, your market may only be $5. I can't charge $6.
Yeah.
Right? And so for them to say, you need to go to our website to buy credits so that you can do this stuff. Apple going and saying, well, you can't even do that. No, you absolutely can communicate to your clients.
You can't control.
You can't do that.
Yeah.
That is anti-competitive without a doubt. And in 2021, that's where we left things. And things have kind of been murderous at best.
It's been a roaring boil.
But they've been fighting each other ever since.
Yeah.
In the beginning of May, though, the judge
things are boiling
that was involved basically said Apple is still violating this ruling, and it really is ticking her off.
Yeah. So there's a few things, actually. The EU actually did fine Apple $500 million and Meta $200 million, respectively, for violating their EU Digital Markets Act, which, again, limiting people doing all this. But the U.S. has now put in place App Store Freedom Act, which would require, large app store operators, very specifically calling out Apple, to let users install third-party app stores and setting them as default instead and things like that.
They're finally making some. I don't know what it cost Epic, and I'm surprised, but effectively, look, there's a concept of web shops that's interesting that's coming back, and developers are now able to open their own web shops that you can offer out-of-app purchases that enable you to circumvent those fees from Apple and Google. So effectively, they're creating these hosts. The other thing that's really interesting about them is that they are waiving fees for the first $1 million. Oh. Normally, they intend to charge 12% per transaction, which is significantly less than 30%. Yeah. But they said to start, they're going to charge 0 fees. I'm sure you're going to have to pay your credit card fees. I'm sure that's still a thing. Not good. I mean, why would they incur? But you're right. That is about 2.5-3%. But they won't take any commission for operating this website until you hit $1 million. Then after you hit $1 million, they'll start taking 12%.
Interesting. Okay.
But because Epic is finally convinced the judge that Apple is explicitly being anti-competitive, because you can't say, go to our web shop.
Yeah.
And Apple's like, well, we can't approve. That's why the app got taken off, is because it was encouraging users to not spend money through the App Store. That's shady. That's bad.
Exactly.
You can make whatever cases you want about security and convenience, and I get it. But we all know you're charging 30%.
Yeah, this is not about security and convenience, unfortunately.
It's about 30%. So I thought that was just interesting. So if you've been with the podcast for a while, gosh, I feel like that's been 3 years.
Almost.
We're getting close. I think Apple takes more shots.
Yeah, probably.
I'm with you.
Well, so we mentioned Amazon a bit. I want to talk about an automaker that's a startup recently that is backed by Bezos. Not Amazon specifically, but Jeff Bezos himself. It is a company that they just released, and there are actual prototypes in the world now, but they have released an EV pickup truck. And I'm a big fan of small trucks. I don't really care about massive trucks.
I want a K truck. You know this about me.
Exactly, like a K truck.
This is a little bit bigger, but I'm obsessed with wanting a K truck.
This is like an original Ford Ranger or
like Maverick,
or a VW Caddy, or like one of the small trucks. Yeah. And it is a full EV truck. People have been saying it's the Tesla like competitor, basically anti-Tesla, because it has. And people are calling it analog as well. It doesn't help that it kind of looks like a DeLorean, like aesthetically. So it doesn't.
I don't think it's hideous.
I don't think it is either.
It's very boxy.
It doesn't have an infotainment center. It doesn't have any self-driving features. It doesn't have any of that. It's all buttons. It's very analog, for good reason. It's to keep the cost down. After the federal EV tax credit,
which is what, about $5,000 to $7,000. I can't ever remember.
The base model will be $20,000 then after. That is absurd. No truck really.
What car?
What car costs that at the moment? Yeah. It's hard to say. So
now I'm curious.
I mean, you look at what the next size of truck, maybe the Maverick. The Ford Maverick might be the next size up.
This reminds me of the Ford Maverick.
But it's still smaller than the Ford Maverick.
Okay. Nissan Versa, $18,330. That is the cheapest car that you can buy. So kind of gives you an idea. Everything else, I would say you're probably in the $24,000 to $25,000 for a base model car. This is the type of stuff I respect and like, because one, it is sub $20,000. Yes, you need the federal thing, but that still puts us at 25
though. Yeah,
let's call it 25. You know what? That still puts it just above the cheapest cars. Yeah. So your Hyundais, your Kias, and your Nissans,
for a vehicle that can like tow and such as well. Not a lot, but it can.
But if you're on a budget and you have to buy the cheapest car you can find, if there's no oil changes.
Yeah, it's EV, so low maintenance.
There's no maintenance.
Potentially
there's
battery
no fuel costs.
Every couple of years, yeah. Your brakes every couple of years, your tires every couple of years. That's it.
Your maintenance is so low. That is one of the beautiful things about an EV.
And you really, based on my experience this far, I've only had an EV for a little bit, you really don't need to do, I need a, 240 volt connection in my garage or whatever. 110, man.
I'm fascinated
call it a day.
Because I love that you're like, stubbornly, this is how I'm going to live. And I was like, I don't know. I couldn't do that. I'd get range anxiety. And you're like, nah, man, bro, hold my beer.
Unless it's like deep winter and you're traveling, 200 miles, I'm not going to worry about it.
I do think you're kind of unique in that if you absolutely had to.
I got a gas car too. So.
Well, But we're lucky in that Elmore actually has
but
charging stations that if you truly needed to, like, if you brought this home like on E, you could charge it for 45 minutes,
boom, done.
Get it up to like 60%, sit here in the office and then take it home and then top it off.
Nearly every Meijer has a huge charger too.
Yeah, they do.
So like you close to a Meijer, done, boom. You look at ChargePoint or the Tesla superchargers, you're good anywhere you go. And all these things can use pretty much all of them because they're now standardized on the, like J something, that port. So, but what's fascinating about this that I want to actually hit home on is this is not a, here's the truck, take it or leave it.
No, it's
Super
like
custom.
the Rivian. Although Rivian's trying to be luxury.
This thing, though, can also be a 5-seater. You don't have to make it a pickup. You can buy the variant, but I think you could do a full one where it looks like a Range Rover,
It's definitely modular. So I'm pulling up the website for, if you're wondering like how all of a sudden I kind of know things about this. So they show the base model, but what's kind of neat is it's like, it can be a pickup truck, but also it looks like it's very easy for them to fit a top. And some of them can be very squared, so you get the maximum amount of space and gives you kind of that retro look. You can get some where it's got seats, but it's more of a roll bar, like the Gladiator, like an exposed Jeep. They've got one that's got like a surf accessories.
Seems like you can do a lot of different variants.
They've got one that's got a sloped roof line on the back, so it's more of a sportier sport utility vehicle.
Maybe that helps with efficiency too. I don't know.
I mean, it's probably at that point just mostly for look, I reckon.
You'd be surprised how aerodynamics affect your battery range, though.
So, yeah.
There's a reason you see a lot of EVs with wheel covers and that kind of thing.
Well, it's the one thing why there's certain things about the Tesla style. I understand why they do what they do.
Why is it?
I hate their rims, but I understand it reduces drag.
Yeah.
And the more you reduce drag.
And this thing still has a frunk and everything too. So you don't even lose out on still have a technical covered trunk, even if you have a truck. It's weird.
So I just started hearing about these. And I got to be honest with you.
Could be pretty cool.
Oh, this is showing that this is... Okay, this is really cool. If you go to Slate.auto is their website. We're talking about how I said it reminds me of a Ford Maverick, the brand new ones. They have a comparison in size. It's smaller than the Maverick.
Yeah, it's shorter. Look at that.
In fact...
About the same height, though.
They compare it to being slightly bigger than a Toyota SR5 pickup truck from 1985.
That's awesome.
And I think that cars like that used to be great.
Dude, I love a little truck, man.
I do too.
I'm a big fan.
This actually, because this would be street legal. I don't need a big pickup truck. I just would love to haul some things.
But some K cars aren't. Some K trucks aren't street legal.
No, you have to get agricultural exemptions.
Yeah. Is this the perfect little mix?
Yeah, because I don't need a big one.
Yeah.
And I don't, like you said, I don't need a primary vehicle. I would love to have a pickup because I need something that doesn't have a roof. Like sometimes when you're towing,
to tow something,
or not tow, but like
have something back there, yeah. Which it has a 1,400 pound capacity for that, but it also has only.
Bro, I ain't building a house.
Yeah, I think that's plenty for what my needs. Moving some mulch or something every once in a while, but the towing capacity is rather low. It's only 1,000, which is pretty much what my station wagon does.
Yeah.
So that's concerning. If I were to have something, I would want at least 1,500. So. Maybe they have better models with bigger.
I was going to say, I think my Mazda's got like 4,000 pound towing or something like that.
If they come out with a dual motor variant where it's, a motor per axle, then I bet you it increases. But I don't, nothing.
Or extended motor or something. But I still don't think that's bad to carry around stuff. My Mazda's 5,000 pound towing.
Yeah. So in short, exciting to see people actually caring about this sort of
this is the type of stuff that makes things cheap. This is what we need.
Yeah.
Everybody wants the luxury because we're trying to fund everything. Because I do love me a Lucid Air, but I'm actually... So I saw International Harvesters. The name got bought for the Scout. International Harvester used to make street cars. And they used to have a pickup truck called the Scout. And the Scout is now an EV. And I really thought those were cool. It's kind of a similar idea to this. But the difference is that this is way cooler. Like, again, because this is just cheap. This is a functional device.
And I like a boxy car, too. Man.
Yeah, I'm pretty fine with it, too.
Fan of.
I think the Cybertruck pushes too far. That is not a good-looking vehicle.
That is not a boxy truck in my mind. Thinking
That
like
is
Astrovan box.
That is like,
Not-
oh yeah, I love an
yeah.
Astrovan. The Cybertruck looks like 3 separate vehicles that ran into each other.
Yeah.
And then something fell on the hood. It's not my thing.
But this thing looks sweet, so I'm excited there. So we'll see how it fares. But end of 2026, I don't know if we mentioned, but it's
They're
claims,
trying to keep it with the federal tax benefit under 20.
Yeah. But also, it claims that it is a 240 mile range, so we'll see. Likely
To
less.
me, if this is just sort of a go grab stuff and, get mulch,
Yeah.
get tools,
And-
I honestly, realistically, probably only need 150.
Yeah.
Well, I think that does it. I think that covers this week's episode of the Lighthouse IT Solutions Podcast. Appreciate you, Griff, as well as all the stuff that you and your team do to put up things on our socials. If you go to lighthousesol.com or lighthousesol.com/podcast, you can view this podcast. You can also go to the hub.lighthousesol.com. Podcasts, blogs, resources, all kinds of fun stuff all sitting there ready for your consumption. I think I teased the last time we're getting ready to do some really cool stuff with some Vidya. That is in the works. We did some demo filming. We're trying to learn our equipment. Believe it or not, we're not all professionals at everything that we do. It's not all gold, especially when you're dealing with a very particular actor. But we're really having some fun with it. So we're running a little bit behind on it, but I'm excited to start sharing some video content with you guys here very soon, and that's looking pretty cool. In the meantime, take care of yourself. Be safe. We're getting right into the thick of and we're almost to that first holiday, man. Memorial Day is right around the corner.
Memorial Day's
Summer starts.
real close.
So we're going to keep it short and simple. So on behalf of Griff, I'm Matt. We'll catch you next time on the next episode of the Lighthouse IT Solutions Podcast.